Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a massive question using some really comprehensive sources. Our mission, really, is to get under the skin of global inequality, understand its deep structural roots. We want to move past just, the immediate story of conquest, the guns, the steel, and find out why societies develop so, unevenly across the globe.
And it all kicks off with this incredibly powerful question from July 1972 on a beach in New Guinea. A politician there, Yali, he just asked this visiting scientist basically, why did you white people develop so much cargo and bring it here while we black people had so little of our own?
That question just cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it? It's not about assigning blame, not at all. It's about finding the ultimate causes. Why, over the 13,000 years since the Ice Age ended, did human history take such wildly different paths on different continents? Why the massive head start for some?
Right. And the sources we're drawing on, they pull from everywhere. Archaeology, genetics, even disease studies, epidemiology. The aim is to build a case that's non-racist, completely impartial, and focuses squarely on, geographic and environmental factors. Essentially, luck of the draw, location-wise. We're trying to show that differences in historical outcomes stem from differences in environments, not innate differences in people.
Okay, let's start by clearing away some of the more superficial answers, the proximate causes.
Yeah.
When you look at someone like Pizarro conquering the Incas, the immediate reasons are obvious. Steel swords, horses, ships, organized government.
And the germs. Can't forget the germs.
Definitely not those incredibly lethal diseases. But saying Pizarro won because of steel swords just pushes the question back, right? Why did Eurasians have the steel, the writing, the complex states first?
Exactly. And why did they have the deadly epidemic diseases to export? Before we get to the deep environmental causes, the ultimate causes, we really have to tackle that old, harmful idea head on. The assumption that some groups of people are just naturally smarter or more inventive than others.
Yeah, the sources are very direct about refuting that. They argue completely the opposite, based on evidence.
It's quite a striking argument, actually. The sources suggest that, on average, people in places like New Guinea might be at least as intelligent as Europeans, maybe even genetically predisposed to higher average intelligence.
That sounds incredibly counterintuitive given, the historical narratives we often hear. How does that argument work?
It comes down to selection pressures. Think about traditional New Guinean societies, small groups, low population density. Survival there often depended heavily on individual wits, resourcefulness, learning quickly to avoid dangers like accidents, tribal warfare, or getting lost. Non-intellectual causes of death were very prominent.
Okay, so natural selection in that kind of environment would favor raw intelligence, alertness, problem-solving skills. The smartest individuals are more likely to survive and pass on their genes.
Precisely. Now, contrast that with densely populated European societies, especially after agriculture took hold. They faced this relentless, brutal selection pressure from epidemic diseases, smallpox, measles, tuberculosis, flu, diseases that thrived in crowds.
So survival there wasn't necessarily about being the smartest, but about having the right genes to resist those specific diseases.
Exactly. Things like having a certain blood type that offered some protection against smallpox. That kind of resistance is genetically determined, but completely unrelated to intelligence. So you had one environment selecting intensely for mental agility and another selecting intensely for disease resistance. It powerfully undermines any racist explanation for who developed complex technology first.
Got it. So innate ability is off the table as an ultimate explanation. What about other theories the sources address, like climate? The idea that colder climates force people to be more innovative.
Yeah, that's another popular one, but it just doesn't fit the facts when you look closely. If cold spurred innovation, Northern Europe should have led the way. But for millennia, it was basically a cultural recipient, getting agriculture, metallurgy, writing from warmer regions like the Fertile Crescent or the Mediterranean.
Right. And even in the Americas, complex societies with writing emerged in Mesoamerica near the equator, and the earliest pottery comes from tropical South America, not exactly chilly places.
Correct. So the cold climate theory doesn't hold water. Then there's the hydraulic theory, the idea that large-scale irrigation projects required and therefore created centralized states to manage them.
Like the big river valleys, the Nile, Mesopotamia.
That's the classic example. But again, the archaeology, particularly in the Fertile Crescent, shows it happened the other way around. You generally needed a reasonably complex, centralized political unit first to organize the labor needed for massive irrigation works. And the very first steps towards food production actually happened in the rain-fed hills and uplands, not in the river valleys that needed that complex water management later on.
Okay, so we've sidelined innate differences, climate, and the idea that irrigation caused the state. What then is the ultimate driver, according to these sources? What's a real bedrock explanation?
It really boils down to one key thing: geographic differences in the timing and spread of food production. Farmer power. That's the ultimate explanation.
And the advantage this gives is just staggering in terms of numbers, isn't it? Farming lets you support maybe 10 to 100 times more people on the same patch of land compared to hunting and gathering.
Exactly. That sheer population density is the first massive advantage. More people means more potential innovators, bigger armies, more complex social structures possible.
But it's not just about having farming, it's about what kind of farming, right? The sources really emphasize the animals.
Absolutely critical. Eurasia hit the jackpot, geographically speaking, with domesticable animals. There are only about 14 large terrestrial herbivore species over 100 pounds that humans have ever successfully domesticated anywhere in the world. Just 14.
Only 14. Wow.
And 13 of those 14 founding species were native to Eurasia. Just one, the ancestor of the llama and alpaca, was from South America. The rest of the world basically struck out.
So what did having those animals, cows, sheep, goats, pigs, horses, actually do for Eurasian societies, beyond just meat and milk, I mean?
They transformed everything. 4 huge impacts. First, manure. Animal manure as fertilizer was revolutionary for crop yields. It allowed continuous farming of the same plots, supporting even denser populations.
Okay, fertilizer. Makes sense. What else?
Second, sheer muscle power. Animal traction. Oxen, horses pulling plows. This was the only way to open up tougher soils for farming. Think about the heavy sod of the North American prairies. Impossible to farm without powerful draft animals.
Right. Expands the usable land massively.
Third, transport and military power. Horses, camels, donkeys, oxen, they were the ancient world's trucks, tanks, and communications network. They enabled trade, migration, and conquest on a scale impossible otherwise. Think cavalry.
Okay, fertilizer, power, transport.
Yeah.
And the fourth one is the really grim one, isn't it? The germs.
Yeah. The lethal gift of livestock, as it's sometimes called, yes. Those crowd diseases we talked about, smallpox, measles, flu, tuberculosis, they mostly didn't start as human diseases. They were originally diseases of herd animals.
They jump species.
Yeah.
Zoonosis.
Exactly. Living in close proximity to dense herds of cattle, sheep, pigs, etc., allowed animal microbes to adapt and jump to humans, evolving into epidemic killers. Eurasians lived with these diseases for millennia, building up partial immunity, both genetic and acquired.
While populations in the Americas who didn't have those domestic herd animals,
they had almost none of those major crowd diseases. The llama didn't live in dense herds close to humans in the same way and didn't seem to be a source of major pathogens for people. So when the hemispheres collided after 1492, Eurasian germs flowed into populations with absolutely no prior exposure or immunity.
and the impact was catastrophic.
Unbelievably so. Disease, often spreading ahead of the actual explorers and conquerors, wiped out an estimated 95% of the pre-Columbian Native American population in some areas. So the ultimate cause, Eurasia having the right wild animals to domesticate directly, led to a key proximate cause of conquest: devastating germs.
Okay, so that's the animal advantage.
Okay.
But there's another huge piece of geographic luck the sources highlight: the shape of the continents themselves, the axes.
Yes, this is crucial for understanding why things spread differently. Eurasia has a predominantly east-west axis. It's much wider than it is tall.
Meaning places along the same latitude, say from France across to China, share roughly similar climates.
Pretty much. Similar day length, similar growing seasons, temperature ranges, rainfall patterns, habitats. This meant that crops or animals domesticated in one part of Eurasia, like wheat in the Fertile Crescent, could spread relatively easily and quickly thousands of miles east or west because the climate they were adapted to didn't change dramatically.
Like a superhighway for agricultural and technological diffusion.
Exactly. Technologies like the wheel, writing, metallurgy could also spread along this east-west corridor without facing major environmental barriers.
Now contrast that with the Americas and Africa. They're oriented primarily north-south.
Right. And moving north or south means crossing latitudes quickly. That means drastic changes in climate, day length, seasons, vegetation zones. A crop like corn, domesticated in Mexico, had to be painstakingly readapted over centuries or millennia to grow in the Andes, or in what's now the eastern United States, because the environmental conditions were just so different.
So the geography itself acted like a massive brake on the spread of farming, livestock, and technologies in the Americas and Africa.
A huge break. Think of the bottleneck of the Isthmus of Panama or the Sahara Desert or the drastic changes in elevation. Innovations just couldn't travel easily between the advanced centers like Mesoamerica and the Andes or between different parts of Africa.
The sources use a really powerful case study to illustrate this exact point about environment shaping destiny, even from a common starting point.
Yeah.
The Maori and the Moriori.
It's a tragic, natural experiment, really. Both groups started as the same Polynesian farmers, same culture, same technology. Then, one group colonized New Zealand, which was large and suitable for their existing crops. They became the Maori.
Okay, so they could continue and intensify their farming lifestyle.
Yes. They developed dense populations, sophisticated agriculture with food storage, which led to social stratification, specialized craftsmen, powerful chiefs, and endemic warfare between groups competing for resources. They developed complex technologies for farming, building, and fighting.
And the other group, the Moriori.
Another group from that same ancestral Polynesian society sailed further southeast and colonized the cold, windy, isolated Chatham Islands. And their tropical Polynesian crops, taro yam, simply couldn't grow in that harsh climate.
So they were forced to abandon farming entirely.
They had no choice. They reverted to being hunter-gatherers, living off seals, shellfish, fish, birds. Because the islands were small and resources limited, they could only support a small, low-density population. They developed simple technology, an egalitarian society with no strong leaders, and crucially, they developed traditions of resolving disputes peacefully. They literally couldn't afford warfare.
So same people, different environments leading to completely different societies and technologies in just a few centuries.
Exactly. And then comes the tragic encounter in 1835. Maori warriors, equipped with muskets obtained from Europeans but using their own traditional organization and ferocity developed over centuries of warfare in New Zealand, arrived at the Chathams. They encountered the Moriori numerous, yes, but peaceful, technologically simple, and completely unprepared for organized violence.
And the result was inevitable.
A complete massacre. The Maori slaughtered or enslaved the Moriori, pretty much wiping them out as an independent people. The environment had predetermined the outcome hundreds of years earlier by shaping the society's capabilities, even though they started from the same genetic and cultural stock.
It's a brutal illustration. So pulling it all together, we've traced the path back from Yali's question. Geographic luck, the availability of domesticable plants and animals, and the east-west axis of Eurasia gave societies there a huge head start in developing food production.
Which then led to denser populations, food surpluses, specialists like kings, bureaucrats, soldiers, priests, artisans.
Which in turn enabled the development of the proximate tools of conquest. Centralized government, writing, metal tools and weapons, the guns and steel, and those devastating germs from livestock.
That largely explains the massive imbalance between continents. But there's one more layer the sources explore, which is fascinating. It addresses why Europe, specifically, eventually overtook other advanced parts of Eurasia, like China.
Right, because China had a huge head start in many technologies for a long time. So why did Europe eventually surge ahead in terms of global power?
The answer seems to lie, counterintuitively perhaps, in political geography and fragmentation. China, thanks to its relatively smooth coastline and interconnected river systems like the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers, was unified relatively early and relatively easily, think, 221 BC. It remained largely unified for much of its history.
Which sounds like an advantage, right? Stability, ability to mobilize resources on a vast scale.
It was, initially. But that unity became a double-edged sword for innovation in the long run. A single decision by one emperor or bureaucracy could halt progress across the entire civilization. For example, when the Ming dynasty decided to dismantle its massive ocean-going fleets in the 15th century, or later when interest waned in developing complex machinery like clocks, innovation could be turned off like a tap.
Okay, I see. A single point of failure, potentially. How is Europe different?
Europe is geographically messy. Think about it. Lots of peninsulas like Italy, Greece, Iberia, islands like Britain, major mountain ranges like the Alps, Pyrenees, Carpathians cutting it up. This geography essentially guaranteed chronic political disunity. No single power could ever conquer and hold all of Europe for long after the Romans.
So lots of competing kingdoms and states.
Dozens of them, constantly vying with each other militarily and economically. This competition, ironically, fostered innovation. If one state, say, decided not to adopt gunpowder weapons or the printing press or better shipbuilding technique,
the rival state would adopt it to gain an edge.
Exactly, and that forced everyone else to adopt it too, or risked being conquered or economically eclipsed. Innovation became almost compulsory for survival. Europe's geographic barriers were enough to prevent long-term unification, but not enough to stop the flow of ideas and technologies between the competing states.
So the final twist is that China's early unity might have ultimately hindered its long-term dynamism, while Europe's chronic disunity, its fragmentation, created a competitive environment that relentlessly drove technological and military advancement.
That's the provocateur argument. Europe's geography fostered a system where innovation, once started, couldn't easily be stopped.
It's a powerful reminder of how profoundly geography shapes history. So as we wrap up this deep dive, the thought to leave you with is this. How much of our modern world, the global economy, political alliances, the distribution of wealth and power, is still echoing patterns set thousands of years ago? Patterns determined by something as seemingly random as which wild plants and animals happen to live where, and the orientation of the land masses they lived on. That initial geographic luck, it seems, cast a very, very long shadow.